I am given the responsibility of introducing the Demings, who I feel hardly need introducing. I think everyone pretty well knows them. But maybe there's some things you don't know. Anne has provided many years here at Marist Grove of helping residents with hypnotherapy. So many people have tried that and found success. It helps them sleep better or deal with other issues. It's really important. And Bob has been serving on the Marist Grove Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. So you might know some of the things he's done, maybe not knowing that he's been responsible for them, but he's been doing a lot. I think you might like to know how they came to be here today. Over dinner one night, the conversation turned to Bear Lake, where the Demings have spent summers for the last 48 years. I was particularly interested in the work they're doing to preserve that lake and a new preserve and wildway of which it will soon be a part. It's going to provide habitat and passageways for threatened wildlife. It's a wonderful project. So as we talked, I thought Marist Grove residents would like to hear more about it, especially part of our focus this month on caring for the earth. Bob and Ann are residents of Marshall Landing for 9 years. Bob, former English, television, and film professor, maybe producer also, and Ann, a psychologist and former college president, were faculty members at SUNY Fredonia, and I know we have some New Yorkers here, so SUNY is State University of New York. And during that time, they bought their cottage at Bear Lake. It's now 100 years old. It's been expanded. Shady Rest Cottage is visited every summer by family and friends, and I think some people from Marist Grove have been up there at the summer also. To preserve for their kids and grandkids its thousands of years of history, the Demings published 3 books about Bear Lake. They're all available here in the Marist Grove Library and also on Amazon. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the program over to the Doctors Deming.
Thank you, Mickey, for the kind words and for inviting Bob and me to come today to talk about a biocontrol program that we put in place at Bear Lake over many years. But it finally did rid the lake of most of its invasive weeds. I suspect that those of you who have vacationed at lakes or have lake homes have experienced weeds in your lake as well. So I'm going to begin talking about what we did at Bear Lake to control the weeds over several years. And then Bob will talk to you about a more exciting news about the Bear Lake Preserve and the Wildway, which are soon to be a reality at Bear Lake. Thanks to Casey Lorick and Frank Altricker for helping us put non-techies show the photos and the videos, and Winnie Hayek, who put them together for us on a PowerPoint to show you. Some of you have visited Bear Lake, as Mickey said, or have heard a lot about it, maybe more than you wanted to over dinner. But let me start with a few photos to give you, and others who have not been there, some visuals of it and our location on it. First slide. So what you're seeing here is a slide, and if you see the outlines in yellow, those are properties along Bear Lake. You notice they're all on the one side. And on the other side, there's hardly any. That's important when we talk about the Wildway. There's another view, a drone view, that a friend of ours who is a photographer took. And you'll notice here, this is a reverse, of course, the one you saw before. All the houses that are on the lake are featured down here in the bottom center. That's another drone view, and you'll see 3 of the houses on the lake, and the one in the very middle, the white one, is ours. That's our house. And that's a view looking across from the front yard of our house, which will show you where the dark trees are. That's where the Bear Lake Preserve is going to be located, and then all around it will be the Wildway. So let me tell you another slide. And that's looking, again, down the lake, and as I say, the preserve will connect with the Wildway and go down toward Pennsylvania. So what about Bear Lake? Bear Lake is a glacier lake founded about 15,000 years ago when that glacier receded northward, leaving behind a massive deposit of gravel and chunks of ice. It's a small kettle lake of about 114 acres, 2.5 miles long and about 30 feet deep at its deepest. It's located 9 miles east of and up Lake Erie Escarpment in the southwesternmost part of Chautauqua County in New York. Approximately 70% of Bear Lake shoreland is undeveloped and comprised primarily of wetlands. In summers, boaters, many boaters, skiers, swimmers, floaters on power boats, kayaks, and sailboats, and even an occasional seaplane land on it. A wonderful summer playground today. It wasn't always that way. For many years, it had too many invasive weeds, so many, in fact, that on occasion it looked like a meadow covering the lake that you could walk across. The very invasive Eurasian milfoil dominated those problem weeds. Let me show you that particular weed. There it is. It's a rather nice-looking weed, as weeds go, but very invasive. And that's what it does on a lake. So it turns it into a meadow. For years, beginning in the 1960s, the Bear Lake Association used chemicals, as did most New York lakes, to try to control weeds. Permits had to be applied for, and residents had to take a course at a nearby community college to be able to put the chemicals into the lake. And it also killed many fish as well as the weeds. And only small areas could be treated, those around docks, and no swimming was allowed for 10 days after it was applied. Chemical treatments continued until the 1980s, when the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, began restricting them. The association stopped using them then because of these restrictions, the high cost of the chemicals, and continuous difficulty getting residents to take the course that was required in order to be able to apply the weeds. Bob and I were retired by 2004 and spending much more time at Bear Lake. So we decided to see if we could do something about those weeds. So we persuaded the Bear Lake Association to form a weed control committee to research solutions. As committee chair, I met with town, state, village, all kinds of of legislators to see if they would help us, and prepared grants and applications to them to remedy the weeds. We even drew up a Bear Lake management plan, which was actually required to accompany any grants that we submitted. And by 2007, the association began receiving grant funding for controlling our weeds. The first option that we tried was the rental of nearby Cassadaga Lake's weed harvester. It was on the lake for 4 days that summer, and it removed 19 truckloads of weeds, which a neighboring farmer gratefully accepted as compost on his farm. Although it cut down on the weeds, the residents' reviews of our efforts were not all positive, because some of the weeds remained floating on the top of the lake, which interfered with boating and swimming. Still, with approval from most members, we repeated the harvesting the next year, this time requesting the residents to please pull in any floating weeds that remained. We also began that year applying for county bed tax grants, which are awarded from the taxes on property rentals along Chautauqua Lake and Lake Erie primarily. And we succeeded in getting grants of between $4,000 and $5,000 almost every year. We also applied for a first ever New York State grant of $9,000, which Senator Kathy Young gave us, and it funded our second year of harvesting and the purchase of 3 rakes, cutters that could cut the weeds for and also large cutters, rakes, and a behind-the-boat motor that the residents could use to pull in any remaining weeds. But next, liability became an issue. Fear of being sued if someone got hurt using the equipment that we had bought. Even after we recruited an attorney friend of ours who drafted for us a hold harmless liability form that all residents had to sign before using any equipment, few residents remained very concerned. Soon after, our committee began researching more environmentally safe options for treating invasive weeds. We invited a friend from Cleveland who was an aquabiologist to teach us about biocontrol. We took her out in our boat to collect a grab sample, which she then took to Dr. Robert Johnson at Cornell to analyze. And Dr. Johnson found that although we did have a serious weed issue, we also had, especially of invasive Eurasian milfoil, we also had natural predators, 3 of them, that could help us to control them. And those 3 insects were a weevil. That's a little weevil. He's actually very little. He's not big like that. Kind of cute, huh? Anyway, a moth and a caddisfly. Those are our three. And these critters, as I say, look large here, but Bob Johnson showed them to us under a microscope. They're really quite small, but very effective. And that most of our invasive weeds were being eaten by our lake's indigenous insects was very good news to us and caused a radical change in our practices towards biocontrol going forward. Dr. Johnson recommended that we no longer harvest the weeds because when we did that, they grow more vigorously. Much as when you cut the grass, it grows more vigorously. And also that we develop a more scientific lake management plan than the one that I had drafted, not being a scientist. To develop that more scientific management plan, Bob and I approached a friend of ours, colleague at the State University of New York, and asked him if he could help us. And he in fact, decided he would dedicate the next semester as a project for his students to do a lake management plan for us. We were very happy about that because they can cost upwards of $50,000 to do. And the students were very excited about coming out the lake to do that. But alas, the plan was never completed because the faculty member that we had helping us left the college in the middle of the semester, leaving it to a student to finish. And although the student did her best, the science was a bit questionable, so we really couldn't use that plan that she developed. A setback for sure, but we were still able to act upon Dr. Johnson's other advice to try only environmentally safe biocontrol using the 3 helpful indigenous instincts that I showed you as our only weed control for the lake and the greater planet. To help that happen, in 2010, Johnson, at our recommendation, added 3,000 more of those little weevils. He went out in the boat and took the ones that he had grown at his Ithaca lab and distributed them at 5 GPS approved, because of the number of milfoil plants that were in those sites. He put the weevils into those 5 sites. And they then became sites that after that, every year he came back and took samples from each of the sites back to his lab to find out if the weevils were in fact doing what they're supposed to do. Not scientists, Bob and I learned a lot every time Bob Johnson came. For example, we learned that if the milfoil has a pink top, it's growing very healthfully. If it's burgundy, it means that the insects are starting to destroy it. And that the weevils lay 2 eggs on each milfoil top of each tip to secure their survival. And finally, we learned that that invasive milfoil, which was so lovely as you saw it, was actually brought to the United States from Asia and Europe, and it was used for aquariums and in kids' fish tanks because it was so beautiful. Unfortunately, it eventually spread outside the fish bowls and became pervasive in lakes. By 2013, our insect population was controlling most of the milfoil, but Johnson recommended that we also add more of our indigenous moths to the lake to make it even more effective. So 3 years after adding weevils, we took him out in our boat to add 30 small burlap packets of moths in various stages of development. Also grown in his lab. And each was attached to the tip of a milfoil. An interesting moth called the water veneer has a semi-aquatic life cycle where its larvae live underwater feeding on aquatic plants like the milfoil, and when adults they emerge to this on the water's surface. The male moths can all fly, but only some of the females can. By 2015, the milfoil stem showed a robust supply of moths and weevils, and soon Johnson evidenced that the 2 of 5 monitoring spaces no longer needed to be chested because they now had so few remaining milfoil stems, leaving only 3 to be monitored annually. And he predicted that the lake might someday show less than desired weed control in some summers, but in general, our program would continue to keep invasive weeds and also toxic algae, which, interesting, feeds on those caddisflies I showed you. Caddisflies feed on them, and that keeps them controlled. The lake is doing well, Johnson suggested. Still another device we might use if it's legal, and that was to add predator fish to the lake, which would eat the small panfish that were eating the weevils that we didn't want them to do. And actually, it is legal on Bear Lake because every year the walleye and the muskellunge are stocked in the lake, so we could add more of those. It's also some human predators help us take care of those small panfish, like our grandkids, when they come to fish, they take those little fish. And also we have lots of Amish neighbors, and they come and they take any fish they catch back to their homes. So they are our human predators to those panfish. So we are now going on 16 years with this very successful biocontrol program. It was helped, as I said, by many grants, from county grants, state grants, local grants, and a great environmental protective aquatic ecologist in Bob Johnson, who guided us residents to rid Bear Lake of most of its annoying invasive weeds. And because of this successful biocontrol program, Bear Lake remains the only one of 5 lakes in western New York that including Lake Erie, that the health department does not have to close to swimming often during the summer because of excessive weeds or toxic algae. That's enough about the Bear Lake Control Program. Let me stop here to ask Bob to tell you about those 2 even more environmentally exciting projects we look forward to, helping with, and we will help with when we return to Bear Lake. One of them you can all follow because it's going to continue all the way from where we have the Western New York Wildway, all the way down through Pennsylvania and eventually into Florida. Please hold your questions until Bob finishes. Thank you for listening. You're up, Bob.
Am I on? Before I discuss those exciting 2 projects that Ann mentioned, let me tell you how we got involved with these projects. Back in 2014, a lumber manufacturer from Tidioute, Pennsylvania, bought the 300 acres across the lake from us, which Ann pointed out to you in the first photo she showed you. This caused us to be very concerned about our biocontrol program because it would be harmed if he developed the lakefront of his property, because that's where the weevils went to winter, above the freeze line. When called, the new owner promised he would not do anything with that land for 20 years. It had been bought as part of a deal he made for land he wanted elsewhere. Ann began appealing to our New York State Senator, a friend of our son's, the DEC, who she's already identified, and to many other entities that might be interested in conserving that land, to no avail. Then, in 2023, only 9 years later, the owner put that land up for sale for 3 times what he had paid for it. Fortunately, it didn't sell. And now, finally, some good news. He has agreed to sell the whole property to the Western New York Land Conservancy if they can raise the money for it before the end of 2026. Their mission, Western New York Land Conservancy, and I quote, is to permanently protect land with significant conservation value in Western New York for the benefit of future generations. They are currently working to acquire that land to bring what they're calling the Bear Lake Preserve into existence as part of their ever more complex plan, the creation of the Western New York Wildway. So those are the two things that I'm talking about. Last summer, Land Conservancy staff came to our Bear Lake house to get a letter of support for their grant and quotes for their publicity because of the biocontrol program that we had established in the 3 books that we had published on Bear Lake. Slide. Now, this slide is going to be up for a while. This is not a commercial. But it's going to be up there. It's just sort of holding space. We were excited to help. We took 2 of them, Marcus Rustin, who's the Western New York Wildway Director, and Andrew Garty, Director of Development and Communications, out in our pontoon boat to take the needed photographs and GPS that they needed for their grant. And we then next drafted a letter of support to be included with their application to the state for $675,000 to begin the Bear Lake Preserve project. And to our delight, that grant was fully funded last December by the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Another $900,000 will still needs to be raised to be used to establish trails that will be maintained in perpetuity, and an overlook of Bear Lake, which will offer access by kayak and canoe from a state-owned launch on the lake's southeast side. The current vehicular access to the lake from the road that all of these properties are on will be closed, and only pedestrian trails and car tops will have access. Now, let me show, to get the commercial off, a short video about the Bear Lake Preserve.
In northern Chautauqua County, New York, Bear Lake is a glacial kettle lake and wetland landscape shaped thousands of years ago. Much of its shoreline is marsh and wetland, creating strong habitat for fish and a wide range of wildlife, including deer, black bear, and birds. This year, the Western New York Land Conservancy is working to permanently protect 311 acres of surrounding forest, wetlands, and shoreline, land that will become the Bear Lake Preserve. Located next to the Floating Fen and College Lodge properties, this effort will connect the landscape into a nearly 700-acre conservation corridor, stretching more than 2.5 miles. Together, these protected lands safeguard sensitive ecosystems, support wildlife, and expand opportunities for people to experience nature year-round, from quiet exploration to winter recreation like cross-country skiing. With community support, Bear Lake and the surrounding landscape will remain protected for future generations.
We won't pass the hat for that. Okay, so the larger Wildway will include the Bear Lake Preserve's 311-acre Bear Lake property, the College Lodge Forest 168 acres, which SUNY Fredonia provided around the camp. It owns the camp, and they're giving the forest to this conservancy. The Floating Fen, which is these are the flowers that grow in the fen, which is 225 acres and 100-acre private property that was donated by a different group. This entire acreage, which is along one county road for 2.5 miles, is recognized as among some of the most ecologically important land in Chautauqua County, important to the lifestyle of our region with a diverse range of habitats and home to the rarest plant and animal communities in the region. Now let me talk a little bit about this, the floating fen. It is a very rare type of nutrient-rich wetland characterized by a thick, buoyant mat of living plants and accumulated organic peat that floats directly on top of open water. Unlike a bog or bogs, which are fed from above, fens are fed by mineral-rich groundwater, creating a spongy surface which supports specialized plants, including carnivorous sundews, wild flags, which you see in the photo, and wild orchids. Fens consist of a 12 to 30 inch thick intertwined mat of roots, mosses, often sphagnum, and grasses that feel like a waterbed to walk on. There is a treasure which we have yet to experience because it came into existence after we left and came back here. So it will be this summer. The Western Wildway, the Western New York Wildway, the Conservancy's second project, is a regional initiative by the Western New York Land Conservancy, focusing on the 8 counties in Western New York, southern Western New York, a coalition of 74 partners, including the region's 3 indigenous nations, all Seneca nations, local and national conservation office, state and county planning departments, and others. The Wildway is a series of interlinked natural passageway, as Anne said, that allows animals and birds to have unfettered ability to travel long distances while accessing food and shelter. Once complete, the Western New York Wildway will include an extensive series of protected lands that will connect the vast forests of northern Pennsylvania to the Great Lakes. It will eventually be part of an even larger Eastern Wildway, which will extend from Nova Scotia to Florida. Let me show you a video from the Conservancy of the Wildway project.
Since 1991, the Western New York Land Conservancy has protected our region's most ecologically significant land. Now, we've developed a long-term vision to protect Western New York's largest remaining forest and habitats. The Western New York Wildway. The Western New York Wildway will reconnect our fragmented landscape and allow wildlife to move between nature preserves such as the Janet Gallegly Allegheny Wildlands in Cattaraugus County, the Floating Fen Preserve in Chautauqua County, and Owens Falls Sanctuary in Erie County. Thanks to a grant from the Nature Conservancy, we embarked on a year-long wildlife movement study. We installed trail cameras throughout the Western New York Wildway to learn how wildlife navigate our region. Red fox, white-tailed deer, bobcat, black bear, fisher, porcupine, coyote, and raccoon. With this data, we can prioritize protecting the corridors these animals need to survive and thrive. Learn more about our work at WNYLC.org.
Okay, the Western New York Wildway encompasses the largest remaining forest wetland beginning at the New York-Pennsylvania line in the forests of the Allegheny Mountains and extends northward through the southern tier of Chautauqua County. Its intent is to ensure wildlife can safely move between habitat areas that spans the northern Appalachians to the Great Lakes. Here are some photos of the western. This is also came from the Land Conservancy. It's interesting to see the birds and animals, fish, snakes, etc., that they plan to navigate all that green wild way. Okay, and finally, the greater network, the Eastern Wildway, is part of a broader continental wildway network that includes the Western and Pacific Wildways. The Western Wildway, this is the Eastern Wildway. The Western Wildway extends from the Yukon Ranges of Alaska down through Alberta, Canada, the Rocky Mountains, the Sky Islands of Arizona and New Mexico, and ends in the Sierra Madre and in northern Mexico. The Pacific Wildway originates from the Cascade Mountain Range of southern British Columbia down into Washington, Oregon, Nevada, and California, ending in Baja California. Okay, and you saw the animals. Oh no, sorry. The last slides. These are some of the animals that will benefit by the establishment of Bear Lake Preserve and the Western New York Way. I couldn't resist. I love these cartoons. Next. One more. No, that's it. That concludes our talk about the Lakes Biocontrol Program and the even more exciting projects ahead for Bear Lake. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for coming. Time?
Thank you so much. If you have a question, please wait for the microphone so everyone can hear it.
Yes.
You talked about using chemicals for years in the lake. How many years was that?
It started in the late 50s and the 60s and went into the 70s.
80s.
80s. It went into the 80s.
Late 80s.
I'm impressed that all those creatures survived through all this chemical use and was still there to take care of the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't have to put them back to get this started?
No.
Very good.
You want to come up here?
Is that it?
No,
All right.
Let me,
Thank you.
Karen.
Bob?
Yeah.
I am assuming this Wildway is a work in progress, right? I mean,
Yes.
And you know, roughly how far along is it as far as, you know, being complete?
Well, the New York Wildway, which we showed from the Bear Lake Preserve through to the Fen, etc., it's quite extensive already. There are two conservancies, the Western New York Land Conservancy and the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy, both of which are trying to get other properties. There is currently a large property which has just gone this week on sale, and if they had the money, they would go after it because it fits into everything that's there.
But to answer your question, it is much more abundant in the West Coast. Much more of their conservancies, I mean, their wildways have been finished. You know, they do road overpasses so that animals can go. And when they take out culverts, they put in walkways for the animals in the culverts. So And the East Coast too has, on the farther East Coast, has a lot of the preservatives for the animals in place already. So Western New York's just kind of getting started with it, so we're excited about being involved.
I really love the pictures of all the animals, but there was one I never heard of before.
The fisher.
The fisher.
The
What
fisher
is the
is
fisher?
a fisher cat. It's
Yes.
about the size of a dog, but it's really a
Weasel.
weasel.
It's in the weasel family, and it actually, the person that bought the lake property across from us, when I called him in 2014, can you not hear me? Okay. Anyway, when I called him to tell him that we hoped he wouldn't develop the land because we were trying to increase our opportunity for our weevils to work, he told me that he had driven the mile-long roadway into his lake property, and he saw lots of rabbits. And he said, that's really interesting, because in Pennsylvania we have no rabbits because we have fisher cats. Fisher cats eat rabbits. So now we don't see very many rabbits
No, we don't.
at Bear Lake anymore,
Right.
because we have fisher cats.
And we know they were there because a resident put up, or had the DEC put up a camera, and the camera captured the fisher cat. So we know there are fisher cats,
They had just come, yeah.
and they have, that's very recent.
I was expecting to see beaver. What's any story about the beaver in this area?
I know nobody mentioned the beavers. The beavers are prominent at Bear Lake. They came last summer onto our land, actually the fall before. And all of our trees that we planted on our Bear Lake property are named after our kids and our grandkids. And the beavers came on land and they took down Mike and Maura, after our two kids. So we had to plant a new Mike and Maura before we left.
Both of which were maples.
So we don't
love
know what's
maple.
going to happen when we get back, whether they survived or not. Sorry, we won't know.
The process of monitoring the weevil population is that Johnson, and now we have a new researcher, would go out on our pontoon boat, and she would throw out a double rake and bring it back, bring the side, and then we would sit there, and she would hand us 6-inch pieces of milfoil, and we'd put them in plastic bags, 25 for each. And we did that for years, 3 times in the summer. But when Bob Johnson was there, he brought his microscope so we could see the larvae, we could see the weevils, I don't know, and the moths in his microscope. I mean, they don't look like what the picture you saw. They are truly microscopic. The normal process is that the adult will lay 2 eggs on the milfoil. The 2 eggs will develop into larvae. The larvae will do the damage. And then, so the larger population that you have of adult females, the better chance you're going to have to get rid of it. That's why we got rid of 2 of the 5. We also discovered, I'm sorry, should I stop?
No, you're fine.
I should stop.
Wait till they ask a question.
What we discovered 2 years ago when I was still going out with a researcher, that the weevils, which had never been on the shore side where the homes are, had moved from where they were closed out to there. So she added A, B, C, D, E, and F. So she comes twice, sometimes three times in the summer.
that there are other lakes that are around Bear Lake. Are they partnering with with your efforts and the other? Like, what's the cooperation? Because it's a region-wide issue, right?
So I don't know. I know that because we have so much wetland and so much uninhabited land, Cassadaga Lake, which is just 3 miles away, doesn't seem to be doing much with this on the shores of their lake, at least. And I haven't heard anything happening at Lake Erie.
My question is about, you said that this pathway for the creatures to go north and south is going to go all the way down to Florida, but of course you're in the western part of New York, and that would be western Pennsylvania. Do you know of any eastern
Well,
passageways that are coming down close to where we are here?
There are quite a few coming down. I don't have the information for today's presentation, but yes, all along from Nova Scotia, all the way down to Florida, along
Right.
the East Coast.
Right.
Eventually, the whole eastern network will be connected all the way down to Florida.
our wild way will eventually move east because there's also an eastern New York,
Yeah, that's what you said.
and that's called the Eastern Wild Way.
Right? Thank you.
It
Thank
sounds
you very
like
much.
one more thing that we need to be questioning our Pennsylvania representatives about and find out who's acting on it and what kind of support they need.
Good idea. Thanks.
All right, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
It was really